He gets down there about that big hole in the river, and he looks up there and he sees that hay rope just going back and forth. That big fish is on there, and he's going up the river and then back down that river. Darndest thing you ever seen. I got to examining him. Do you know they had to take him plumb over to the scrapyard in Terre Haute, and they ended up selling that old catfish for junk because it's full of hooks and sinkers. Thank
you. Now we're going to have a sellout crowd this year. Well, each time we've had a sellout crowd, and of course once the boat is moving, everybody wants to get on that boat. Because this is the way I got introduced to storytelling. Some 15 years ago, I went to Jonesboro, Tennessee, thinking that it was a big liars contest. And they called it storytelling.
The left barrel flew up the river, and it killed 1,000 wild geese. And the right barrel went down the river, and it killed 1,000 wild ducks. The ramrod flew out of that gun and went up in the pear tree under which I was standing, and it split a limb, and 10 turtle doves got caught, and they fell down on the ground right at my feet. The stock went behind me and killed an 8-point buck. The hammer hit me in the head and knocked me in the river. I went to the bottom and fought my way to the top and waded out, and I had this here hunting coat and both boots full of fish.
They finally called this one fella in, and he sat down, and the state's attorney said, "Would you please state your name?" And he said, "Say why I came?" He said, "No," I said, "State your name." He said, "Oh, I'm sorry, Charles Brown." He said, "Well, what do you do for a living?" "Am I very forgiving?" Well, the judge called the state's attorney and defense counsel up, and he said, "Gentlemen, I think it's rather obvious that this man has a hearing impairment, and sitting on the jury is not going to be possible in this case. So do you have any objections if we just excuse him?" And they said, "No, Your Honor, no objection." And he said, "Well, fine. Would one of you please tell him that he's been excused?" At which point the man stood up and said, "Thank you, Judge," and walked out of the courtroom.
It really helps to communicate with people. It's, you know, if they get a chuckle out of it, then, you know, you've done your job for the day. You made somebody happy. What would make me happy in the contest is if I lived through the contest.
When it came to coon hunting, Slobbers was the best. Whatever size coon I wanted, I'd just set that size board out on the back porch, and the next morning there'd be a coon that size. And everything was going along fine till one day my wife forgot and set the yarning board out there, and Slobbers took off and never did come back.
But he was a proud Buckeye, and I was just as proud as he was proud to be a Buckeye. I knew Ed would be here tonight, so I looked that word Buckeye up, and the dictionary says a Buckeye is a hairless nut of no practical value.
I got the brick off your back. I got you out of the hole. I put you in my pocket and got you warm. Why would you bite me? The bear snake just hissed. You knowed I was a snake before you put me in your pocket. And you bit it. And that's the end of that story.
Mosquitoes, huge mosquitoes. 1 could whip a dog, 2 could overcome a man, and 4 could fly off with a cow.
There's 2 levers on an octopus. Number 1 makes it go around like this in a circular motion. And if you pull the other lever, lever number 2, it makes it go up like this. So when you pull both levers, it kind of goes up and around like this. Now there's a little trick about the octopus. If you get them going this way, okay, and you grab that second lever, and if you get it just right, when it's just up there and you pull it as fast as you can, that dude will come straight down and go straight back up, and whoever's in the seat, there it was.
So we've got just a little bit of everybody. We have some polished acts. We have some people who are considered professional humorists. And we have some people who've never done this before in their life.
Ladies, In aisle 4, we have the latest in silk dresses, all in the best of fall fashions, $15 each. While the blue light is flashing, you all come over here and get your silk dresses. There are a bunch of half-finished dresses all on the floor with these little dead worms hanging around.
I said, Granddaddy, what about that snakebite medicine you keep in your back pocket? He always kept a half pint of fine Southern Kentucky snakebite medicine there. He got snake bit a lot.
He opens up the cabinet, turns on the main switch for the blower. Vroom, the air conditioner comes back on, cool air circulating throughout the house. I look down like, I didn't even know that switch existed. He goes, well, tell me then, how did it get turned off? I said, oh, I got it. Air conditioner's evil and it's out to get me.
As far back as I can remember, especially in the summertime, my father and mother and the neighbors would gather on our front porch or one of the neighbors' front porch, and I don't know what the women talked about, housework I guess, but as far as my dad and the men were concerned, they talked about their childhood days. There was probably a nugget of truth in each one of the tales that they told, but they also had been embellished over the years, and embellished quite a bit, I might add.
And Atlas' eyes was getting bigger all the time, and he said, Dave, that explains the whole thing. Our center fielder caught one yesterday and never knew where it come from. Steamer was kind of wandering around the store, and Steamer saw those coconuts. He said, John, what are those big, brown, round, furry things you got over there in the corner? John said, well, Steamer, did you ever get yourself a mule? Steamer said, no. John said, well, them are mule eggs. You know how a chicken will lay an egg and the hen will sit on it and hatch it out to baby chickens? Well, that's how the mules do it too, you know. He said, you reckon I can have one?
For you young people, we have what we call Lifebuoy soap in those days. 87-year-old woman had soap in mine. She walked up to that 90-year-old man in her feeble way. She tapped him on the shoulder and said, you got any Lifebuoy? He looked at her and he said, set the pace, woman, set the pace.
That very night, I was almost asleep in bed, and I heard a great flapping outside, as if a huge swan were taking off. Groggy, I went to the window. In the silvery moonlight, I saw Bob perched on the roof of the garage and holding in his teeth what looked to be a small rodent. I was ready for Bob to go. The next morning at breakfast, Bob came winging up to the table and hovered alongside me.
Anyway, preacher man, to give you an idea of just how lazy he was, he had a big swing out front on his porch, but he had never sat in that swing unless there was a wind, because if there wasn't a wind, it wouldn't move.
Well, Dennis was riding on a train, and he disputed the proper fare. 10 cents more, loudly the conductor said, he'd have to bear. Well, Dennis protested on and on. His muscles, they did quiver. And the conductor threw his suitcase off as the train passed over the river. Hoots, man, exclaimed Dennis, do you see what you've done? It's not enough that you've overcharged me. Now you're trying to drown me, son.
The laws and government of the New Harmony establishment came about through the Articles of Agreement. They gathered in a church right here in town one evening. Father Rep said, I've got some articles here, you're going to agree with them. He said, oh, one more thing, you're going to be celibate. Now, it was at that point that that church became what we now know to be the Roofless Church. It's right up the street, you can check it out. So you say, Mitch, they were celibate. What did they do for recreation? Well, they sang a lot. Where did you think rap music came from? In fact, they formed their own little band, called themselves No Kids on the Block.
I think for something like this, like I said, you've got to have an ounce of truth and about 95% of fantasy. For me, it's fun telling stories. To a lot of my friends, it's fun listening, and you've got to have both. And even if you don't feel like you want to tell stories, it's a lot of fun to come listen to stories. And we need 12 times more audience than we do performers.
Alone. But now, he was a nice little bear. His mama tried to teach him right. Because where he'd knocked the cornmeal over there on the ground, he took his little claw and he wrote, "Thank you." The ham was delicious. The deviled eggs were divine. The potato salad wasn't quite right, and the cake came out of a box. Now, I looked around very carefully to make sure that bear was still gone, that my husband hadn't come back. And I took my foot and I erased the last two statements. Thank you.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you're looking for a tie to last you a lifetime, this is it. You can wash this tie 100 times and it will not show any wear or tear. It will not rip or unravel or wrinkle. But there's only one thing wrong. It stretches after every washing.
The number one winner. Da-da-da-da-da-da. It's that absent-minded professor, Mr. McLeod. Hey, Jeff, where are you? Speaks to say 2 words. 2 words.
Thank you.
Thank you.
In keeping the upper lip stiff, it is given in a recent number of the weekly bulletin of the Federation of Civil and Engineering Confectors, which prints the following letter from a bricklayer to the firm for whom he works. Respected Sir, when I got to the top of the building, I found that the hurricane had knocked some of the bricks off the top. So I rigged up a beam and a pulley at the top of the building and hoisted up a couple of barrels full of bricks. When I'd fixed the building, there were a lot of bricks left over. I hoisted the barrel back up again, secured the line at the bottom, and then went up, listen, and filled the barrel with extra bricks. Then I went down to the bottom and cast off the line. Unfortunately, the barrel of bricks were heavier than I was, and before I knew what was happening, the barrel started down, jerking me off the ground. I decided to hang on. And halfway up, I met the barrel coming down. And received a severe blow to my shoulder and continued to the top, banging my head against the beam and getting me fingers jammed in the pulley. When the barrel hit the ground, it bursted its bottom allowing all the bricks to spill out. I was now heavier than the barrel. And so started down again at high speed. Halfway down, I met the barrel coming up. And received severe injuries to my shins. When I hit the ground, I landed on the bricks, getting several painful cuts from the sharp edges. At this point, I must have lost my presence of mind. Because I let go the line. The barrel then came down, giving me another heavy blow on the head and putting me in hospital. I respectfully request sick leave.